How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Rolling Lines and Apples and Geno's production. My name is Josh Hutchinson, and I'll be your host. Today, I'm going to be giving you a fantasy hockey preview for the Pacific Division. Let's do this. What's going on, folks? I am riding solo today. It's Wednesday morning on September 18th. Training camps, I believe some training camps are starting today, which is extremely exciting. You know what? We're gonna dive into a Pacific Division preview to kind of end this series. Gugsy was unavailable this week to record, but I wanted to get this out as soon as I could. I tried to get Blake on the pod, but he's been running himself basically into the ground, putting out podcasts essentially every day. He was recording another one today at some point, so don't want to completely burn him out at this point. We need all of the energy that we can get from Mr. Blake Creamer. But yeah, we're gonna get into this. I'm hyped. Let's go. Let's kick this off. Let's not waste any more time. We're going to start in alphabetical order with the Anaheim Ducks. They've got fresh jerseys. They've got the throwback to the best logo of all time in the NHL, in my opinion. I'm so excited that they're throwing it back. A little upset that they still have that stupid web foot on the shoulder of their jerseys, but you know, I mean, I'll take what I can get here. Like at least we're not in the black and gold phase anymore. We are back to Mighty Ducks jerseys. I'm very excited about that. So last year they were bad, really bad. They were seventh in the Pacific Division. Some would say the Pacific Division is one of the weaker divisions in hockey. I'd probably agree. I think the Metro would give it a run for its money, but I do think that the bottom half of the Pacific was pretty brutal last year. And obviously Anaheim was there. They were 26th in the league in Corsi for percentage, 30th in expected goals for percentage, and 28th in scoring chances for percentage, all at even strength. They had the 20th best 5v5 save percentage at .904 as a team, and their shooting percentage was 28th in the league at 8.36. So not only did they not generate a ton, but they did not convert well at all at 5v5, and they didn't fare much better on the power play. They were tied for 25th in the league with a 17.9% conversion rate. I mean, this team has been a bit of a mess every single year. They've got this really fun young core. Every single year we get hyped up about the Anaheim Ducks. Obviously there was Trevor Zegras barely played last year, and that certainly hurt them. But yeah, I mean, across the board, they were a bit of a mess, both offensively and defensively. We'll go into their key departures and additions. So going out the door, you had Jakob Silfverberg retiring this offseason, and then Max Jones went out the door. So not a ton of major losses. In terms of key additions, Brian Dumoulin came over in a trade from the Seattle Kraken here in the offseason. Cutter Gauthier, that's the big one. He'll play the biggest part of any of these additions on this team. He's obviously a rookie coming out of college. He was well known last year for forcing his way out of Philly, and Philly fans, as they do, did not take kindly to Cutter Gauthier wanting out of Philly. So and quite frankly, the ownership and management in Philly kind of sold him down the river. They sent him down the river in a basket. And they didn't look back. So Cutter Gauthier looking to kick off his NHL career this year in Anaheim. And then Robbie Fabry came over to trade from Detroit. So not a ton of additions here. I think they're really probably banking on their young players to all sort of take a step. They've got a really nice young core, as I mentioned already. Let's look at the goaltending. So John Gibson started 44 starts last year. It had a 904 even strike save percentage. Struggled a little bit. Obviously, the defensive environment in front of him was not great. He's been known in previous years as being a volume starter, but that seemed to change last year as Lucas Dostal came into the fold. He started 38 starts and actually had a 915 even strength save percentage, so performed quite a bit better than Gibson at even strength. And he seems to be the goalie of the future here. And I wonder if the tide is starting to shift, and if he is now the 1A going forward. I still think that it's probably going to be a tandem situation similar to what it was last year, but I do think Lucas Dostal probably gets maybe a few more starts than Gibson this year, which is exciting. I think he showed some moments of brilliance last year, despite the Ducks being brutal in front of him. So let's look at the Anaheim Ducks schedule here. They have 13 back-to-backs, which is tied for 11th in the league. 41 off nights, as they do basically every year. That is first in the league. This is a team that you want players from this team just for the off nights. You're going to get them in your lineup more often than not. And then in terms of playoff schedules from weeks 22 to 24, they have 9 games with 4 off nights, which is not the greatest schedule in the world. But then from weeks 23 to 25, they have 12 games with 6 off nights, and that is one of the better schedules in the league over that stretch. So if your league goes to the bitter end of the year with your playoff schedule, Anaheim Ducks, you're going to want to be hanging on to them the whole season. So in terms of a power play projection, last year Greg Cronin had a fairly even split power play. He split the big boys up, and honestly, are there really big boys on this team? There's a lot of parity in terms of the talent, and a lot of young guys that are looking to take a step forward this year. But I've got the first unit set as Leo Carlsson, Trevor Zegras, Mason McTavish, Troy Terry, and Cam Fowler. Fowler got a lot of time on the power play last year when we all thought that Olin Zellweger and Pavel Michikov may be taking things over. Michikov did get a little bit of time here and there, but it seemed like Cam Fowler was still the preferred option. Now, there has been a lot of talk in the offseason about Fowler being dealt and how they're working with him to try and find a spot for him moving forward. So it sounds like they're looking to deal him, and I imagine that's probably because they've got Zellweger and Minchikov waiting in the wings, and they're more than capable to be running a power play and to be eating minutes on this team. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But until then, I still think Cam Fowler is probably going to get the lion's share of the power play minutes. A couple dark horses to get onto this unit. I think Frank Vetrano, who had a huge year last year, could get on there. I do think Cutter Gauthier, there is a potential for him to get some minutes on the power play as well. Obviously, he's got a really, really nice shot, and he is a bit of a sniper. So I think that if they decide to ride him out of the gate, he could get some power play time too. But as we've seen in previous years, the philosophy on rookies at times, as it was with Leo Carlsson last year, was to load manage, which I don't know that I fully understand in this context. At least in the context of the NHL, but it's possible that Cutter Gauthier could get that treatment as well, although there hasn't been any evidence of that yet or anything said outright. So we'll see how things play out in training camps coming up here. In terms of my forward projections, I've got Leo Carlsson at 22 goals, 42 assists, 64 points. That's a bit of a step forward for Carlsson. I think he's going to probably play a ton of minutes this year and will hopefully flourish potentially playing every night. And then Mason McTavish, I've got him for 26 goals, 35 assists, 61 points. Troy Terry, 27 goals, 43 assists, 70 points. Trevor Zegras, I've got him for 23 goals, 43 assists, 66 points. I've got Cutter Gauthier for 28 goals, 19 assists, 47 points. Now, I'm going to be talking about a lot of rookie projections here on this episode. That's just the way that things have laid out. A bunch of these teams have rookies, and I am not confident in my rookie projections at all. I go off of whatever information that I have from prior leagues and limited time. And in Cutter Gauthier's case, he had one game in the NHL at the end of the season. You can't really garner much from that, but so I'm not entirely confident in my 47 point projection for Cutter Gauthier, but we got a bit of a ballpark guess and a bit of a reference point here. And then Frank Vatrano, I've got him for 32 goals, 33 assists, 65 points with 265 shots, 139 hits, and 80 blocks. I think that's probably the most controversial one there. I have him for higher than I think a lot of people would. I like Frank Vatrano. I like what he did last year. It's very possible that he doesn't get played the way that he was last year, which was, they leaned on him on the power play. He did perform exceedingly well on the power play. And was kind of the number one shooting option. So I'm not sure if that's the way that they're going to go moving forward, but I still feel good about what Frank Vatrano did and the numbers under the hood for the most part. So I do think that he has the potential to get right back up there again. And if they're planning on trading him, which I think he's probably a good trade asset, they're going to want to play the shit out of him just to kind of keep his value at a high. So so those are my projections there. Obviously, Troy Terry, I have his projection dialed back for what it was last year. He had a really tough year. A lot of us drafted him at right wing, and we're pretty disappointed with how the season went. Hopefully, having his buddy Trevor Zegras back in the fold will help things out. But yeah, a lot of these guys I have for higher projections than I think some of our other guys at Apples and Genos have them for. I do think that these young guys take a bit of a step this year, but that it remains to be seen whether or not that's actually going to happen. I think you hope that maybe there's a coaching change here. I'm not the biggest fan of Greg Cronin. In terms of defense, we've got Cam Fowler. I've got him for 7 goals, 40 assists, 47 points. Got Pavel Mintyukov for 6 goals, 25 assists, 31 points, and 106 hits. And then I've got Olen Zellweger for 11 goals, 29 assists, 40 points, and 107 blocks. I think that there's a lot of variables that go into this. That Cam Fowler 47 point projection, that is contingent on him playing power play 1 for the entire season. And then I think the ceilings of Zellweger and Mintyukov also increase if Cam Fowler goes out the door, because they'll get a lot more minutes 5v5, and one of them is probably going to get the power play opportunity. I think that Olen Zellweger is probably, they would be best off using Zellweger in that position. I think he's more suited for a power play role. But I think that these are certainly guys to watch. That's for sure. And then my top 3 targets for the Anaheim Ducks are Frank Vatrano, Troy Terry, and Trevor Zegras. Frank Vatrano, he's going on Yahoo at 146.2. That simply cannot be. He is a category filler, and I think that he should be going higher than that. So that's why I have him on my top 3 targets, especially in Bangers Cats leagues. This guy's a monster. He's one of the better shot blockers for forwards in the league. He hits, he shoots, and he scores points. Troy Terry, I've got him as a top target. I think that he's going to have a bounce back year. And I think stonks are very low on Yahoo. His ADP is 176, and in Apples and Genos leagues is 140.6. So I'm totally comfortable taking Troy Terry in that range. And then Trevor Zegras, I think he'll also have a bounce back year. Hopefully he's healthy. He's got a new haircut. He's got new digs. It's a pretty gnarly haircut, but I mean, that's just a matter of opinion, I guess. And his Yahoo ADP is actually lower than Troy Terry's. It's 187, and his Apples and Geno's ADP was 204.6. And I like Trevor Zegras going forward on this team. There was a lot of talk about him being dealt as well at points last year, but I do think that if he sticks around, he'll be an important part of this core moving forward. The Calgary Flames. This is a team that I could truly see being near the bottom of the league this year. Last year they were 5th in the Pacific, but they did have pretty decent underlying stats at 5v5, 9th in Corsi for percentage, 13th in expected goals for percentage, and 19th in scoring chances for percentage. I should mention that when I say expected goals for percentage, that's using the natural stat trick expected goals model. So I realize that's a little bit ambiguous when I've been saying that on prior podcasts. I'm using natural stat trick and their model to look at expected goals. Their 5v5 save percentage was 27th in the league. It was brutal. They had an 897 team save percentage, and their shooting percentage was 21st in the league at 9.27%. Their power play was tied with the Anaheim Ducks, as the aforementioned Ducks at tied for 25th at 17.9% conversion. This team just man, they generate a bit, but they're just not that talented. There's not a lot of conversion happening on this team. There's a lot of guys that shoot a lot, but aren't necessarily high percentage converters. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here. They've got a little bit of youth coming up, but none of the guys coming up are really like top end talent. The key departures, the big one is Jacob Markstrom. It was well documented that he was interested in leaving the Flames. He got traded to the Devils. Oliver Shillington was another departure there. He came back near the end of the year after a long layoff with injury, but he left for Colorado in free agency. In terms of key additions, they didn't make a ton. They've got Anthony Mantha and Ryan Lomberg. Neither of them will be very fantasy relevant, I don't think. Anthony Mantha will probably be a streamer, but not much more than that, I don't anticipate. And then let's take a look at their goaltending. So Jacob Markstrom, as I mentioned, he's gone. We've got Dustin Wolf and Dan Vladar as a tandem this year. It'll be interesting to see whether they go straight tandem or whether they let someone take the reins. Dustin Wolf obviously is very highly touted, struggled a little bit last year. In 15 starts, he had a 901 even strength save percentage. Dan Vladar was even worse. He had 19 starts and had an 885 even strength save percentage, which is just brutal. So it'll be interesting to see. I do anticipate that Dustin Wolf probably gets a run at some point this year. So that's who I would be banking on. But the situation in front of them is not necessarily amazing. I mean, there's certainly 0G candidates to watch. I'm definitely keeping an eye on Dustin Wolf, though, as a guy that's been a pretty highly touted goalie for a long time and that performed extremely well at the AHL level. In terms of schedule quirks, we've got 11 back-to-backs. That's tied for 26th in the league. 23 off nights. That's also 26th. They're playoff schedule from weeks 22 to 24. They've got 12 games with 4 off nights. And then from weeks 23 to 25, they've got 11 games with 2 off nights. Neither of these are incredibly remarkable. Not a ton of off nights. They do play a decent amount of games. But yeah, they're not, I mean, none of these stats are really that remarkable at all. It's important to assess this going into draft season, but I'm not really going to be thinking about the Calgary Flames a whole lot in regards to their schedule here. My power play projection for the Flames, I've got Nazem Kadri, Jonathan Huberdeau, Igor Sharangovich, Andrei Kuzmenko as the forwards. Those were the forwards for a good chunk of the year in the second half last year, and I do anticipate that that'll be the way that they go, at least to start. And then there's the conversation about, do they go with Mackenzie Weegar or Rasmus Anderson? In the back half of the year, it was Weegar, so I am leaning towards him. I do think Anderson probably gets a bit of time at some point, but Mackenzie Weegar, I think, is the guy at least to kick things off this year. And going into forward projections, we've got Nazem Kadri. I've got him for 31 goals, 40 assists, 71 points, 273 shots. When I mentioned high volume shooters and low percentage converters, Nazem Kadri is number one on that list on this team, but I still anticipate him having a pretty decent season and likely leading the team in scoring. Jonathan Huberdeau, I've got him for 19 goals, 45 assists, 64 points, which is a bit of a bounce back compared to the last couple of years. I still do think that there's something there for Jonathan Huberdeau, and they've got to salvage something and with that absolute boat anchor of a contract. Blake Coleman, I've got him for 23 goals, 30 assists, 53 points, 120 hits. He had a really great year last year. I do think that I have his points dialing back a little bit. I don't think he's really much of an offensive guy. He has a bit of goal scoring potential, but I don't see him getting back to the levels that he was at last year. Michael Backlund, I've got him for 24 goals, 23 assists, 47 points. Igor Sharangovich, 25 goals, 28 assists, 53 points. Martin Pospisil, I've got him for 17 goals, 18 assists, 35 points, and 294 hits. And Andrei Kuzmenko, 29 goals, 28 assists, 57 points. So Pospisil, I mentioned him. He is going to be near the league leaders in forward hits. That's a guy that you're going to want to target at the back end of your Bangers Cats League drafts. And he's a guy that has a little bit of offensive upside. He played with Nazem Kadri for a good chunk of the year, and that really helped him offensively. So, I mean, he's a guy that you should certainly be watching. Yeah, none of these guys are incredibly interesting to me, other than Nazem Kadri. I think that's a guy that I'll be targeting. But everyone else, I don't think I'm really hot on any of these guys, to be honest. Let's go into the defense. I've got Mackenzie Weegar for 13 goals, 40 assists, 53 points, 212 shots, 190 hits, 184 blocks. This guy is a Bangers Cats monster. He fills all of the categories. I see him playing a good chunk of time on the power play this year, and man, I mean, I said it on the podcast yesterday with Blake. Of reservations picking Mackenzie Weegar as early as like the fourth round, which is a round where he's being taken, fourth to fifth round. And I don't know, maybe I should be leaning into it, because this guy has a really nice peripheral floor, and I think he is going to get lots of minutes and a good opportunity here in Calgary this year. Rasmus Anderson, I've got him for 9 goals, 28 assists, 37 points, 173 blocks. Obviously, the offensive upside is probably going to take a hit with Mackenzie Weegar getting more power play time, as I'm projecting here. So it is possible for Anderson to kind of reach a little bit more in terms of point potential if he gets a little more power play time than I'm anticipating, but this is kind of where I see him landing. And then my top 3 targets, I've got Nazem Kadri. As I mentioned, Kadri is going at 158 in Yahoo leagues, which I love that. I will absolutely be taking Nazem Kadri at that point. And then in Apples and Genos leagues, 113.6, and I would still take Kadri at that point too. I think he generates enough shots. He's going to play tons of minutes, and it's probably going to get 70 points. So yeah, big fan of Kadri. Obviously, I've always loved Kadri since his days in Toronto, and I want to give him some love here. Mackenzie Weegar is another one of my targets for the same reasons I mentioned it before. And Martin Pospisil, I have him on here because he's going at 169 in Yahoo and 260 in Apples and Genos best ball leagues. I think that Pospisil is going to give you some value in Bangers Cats leagues for sure, because that guy just hits so much. If he can stay in the lineup and stop getting suspended, because that's starting to become a problem. All right, let's move on to the Edmonton Oilers. They were second in the Pacific last year, had a trip to the Stanley Cup Finals. Obviously fell short in Game 7, but it was just a thrilling run. I haven't had that much fun watching the Stanley Cup playoffs in a long time. It was a really fun year for the Oilers, and obviously a disappointing finish, but they are ready to go. I think that like these guys are going to be fired up and ready to go this year. Last year at 5v5, they were great. Third in Corsi for percentage, first in expected goals for percentage, and second in scoring chances for percentage at even strength. Obviously last year they had that dreadful start where they were essentially in last place. They fired Jay Woodcroft and turned things around. We were talking on the show about how they're gonna bounce back. It's gonna be fine. Like their underlying numbers were ridiculously good, even though they weren't converting, and they figured it out. Obviously, you can't keep McDavid, Draisaitl, and all these guys down for long. Their save percentage at 5v5 was 14th in the league at 907. That actually was brought down significantly by Jack Campbell. Calvin Pickard and Stuart Skinner actually had exceptional years at 5v5 on their own. Their shooting percentage at 5v5 was 15th in the league at 9.54%, and their power play percentage, they had the fourth best power play in terms of conversion at 26.3%. They're going to be near the top of the league every single year. That's just what we've come to expect from the Oilers. In terms of departures, a few big names, Cody Ceci, Ryan McLeod, Philip Broberg, Dylan Holloway. Don't know that there's a ton of fantasy relevance there going out the door. But in terms of additions, there is a bit of fantasy relevance here. We've got Jeff Skinner, Victor Arvidsson. Both of those guys in pre-training camp practices have been running on a line with Leon Draisaitl, which I absolutely love. That's incredibly exciting. I think these guys will eat with Leon Draisaitl. Obviously, they won't get power play time this year because their top power play is pretty much set. But both of them are probably either of them could be the next man up if there's an injury there. So those guys are definitely interesting targets. Vasily Podkolzin was brought in as a depth piece, and Ty Emberson came back in the trade for Cody Ceci. So in terms of goaltending, I mentioned Stuart Skinner, Calvin Pickard had pretty decent years. Stuart Skinner, 57 starts last year. He was a volume starter. I believe he was fifth in the league in starts last year. He had a 915 even strength save percentage. Calvin Pickard started 20 games and had a 921 even strength save percentage. Both of these guys performed exceptionally well. I still do expect for Skinner to get lots of starts. And this is a guy that is one of the volume starters that is on an incredibly good situation in Edmonton. Is going to have a nice environment in front of him, and honestly, like, it gets faded a little bit because he's not one of the big name goaltenders. So that's a guy that I definitely am keeping an eye on. Obviously, in some of the Apples and Genos leagues, he may fall far enough that I may consider taking him. But in most leagues, I'm probably not going to be taking Stuart Skinner if I'm employing 0G. In terms of schedule quirks, they have 14 back-to-backs. That's tied for fourth in the league, and 30 off nights. That's tied for 15th, right in the middle. In their playoff schedule, they from weeks 22 to 24, they have 9 games with 1 off night. That's a terrible playoff schedule, one of the worst. But then from weeks 23 to 25, they have 12 games with 6 off nights, which is a fantastic schedule. It's one of the best, actually. It's fascinating when that happens, when there's only when there's only 1 week difference between those playoff schedule stretches. But yeah, Edmonton, nice schedule from 23 to 25, not so nice from 22 to 24. But I mean, some of these guys are so good. In those 9 games from weeks 22 to 24, they may produce just as well as someone playing in 11. So their power play projection, I mean, this is the easiest one to project. It's McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman, Nugent Hopkins, and Bouchard. There's no reason to change that. They are absolutely outstanding and will probably be one of the best power plays in the league once again this year. In terms of forward projections, Connor McDavid, this is a fun one. I have him for 46 goals, 96 assists, 142 points, 53 power play points, 301 shots, and 113 hits. That is like an underrated part about Connor McDavid is the hits. He's over 100 hits, even like score. Essentially, he's going to lead the league in scoring, lead the league in power play points, get over 300 shots, and over 100 hits. That is utterly insane. I mean, what else do you say about Connor McDavid? He's the best player in the league. Jeff Skinner, I've got him for 29 goals, 36 assists, 65 points. Zach Hyman, I've got him for 47 goals, 38 assists, 85 points, and 294 shots. Draisaitl, I've got him for 45 goals, 68 assists, 113 points with 46 power play points. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, I've got him for a bounce back with 27 goals, 55 assists, 82 points, and 36 power play points. And then Victor Arvidsson, I've got him for 26 goals, 37 assists, 63 points, and 264 shots. Some might say I'm a little too high on Arvidsson and Skinner. I would say they're going to be playing with Leon Draisaitl. And I think both of these guys are exceptionally talented. And despite not getting power play time, I think they're going to produce just fine on this Oilers team. In terms of defense projections, Matthias Ekholm, I've got him for 10 goals, 31 assists, 41 points, and 131 hits. Evan Bouchard, I've got him for 14 goals, 66 assists, 80 points, 36 power play points, and 108 blocks. And Darnell Nurse, I have him for 10 goals, 25 assists, 35 points, 158 hits, 156 blocks. So Darnell Nurse, obviously, he's a guy that maybe you're targeting in Bangers Cats League. I think there is an argument to take him in points leagues as well. He does produce enough, and obviously plays on the Edmonton Oilers, so he's going to also luck into some offense here. But he has a really nice peripheral floor as well, and he's definitely still valuable. Matthias Ekholm, I think, is a low key. He might be a low key steal in some spots. I think that he produces a little bit better, especially in Edmonton, than people think. So yeah, 41 points for a guy that doesn't play on the power play is pretty nice. So I think Matthias Ekholm is a guy that you can probably get at a nice value. And then Evan Bouchard, obviously, he's playing on that top power play, and he's looking pretty damn good doing it. He's going to probably go in your second round, and you're going to be pretty happy if he falls in your lap. All right, my top three targets, Matthias Ekholm, as I mentioned, he's going right now in Apples and Geno's best ball leagues. He was going at 160. In Yahoo leagues, he's actually going at 104. So I'm not as stoked about that ADP. I probably would want to pick him a little bit later, but in a lot of my drafts, he is falling quite a bit later than that. So that's a guy that I think you could get if you need maybe a fourth defenseman on your team, whether it's Bangers Cats or points. And then Zach Hyman, he's going at a 22.9 in Yahoo leagues, and in Apples and Geno's leagues, his ADP is 22. So I'm pretty happy getting Zach Hyman at the back end of the second round. I think that he, as long as he's playing with McDavid, I think he's going to produce in a similar manner. I don't think that he's going to reach the goal totals that he did last year, but I still do think that he's going to be extremely valuable. And left wing, right wing eligibility, I like that a lot. Dual eligibility is very nice in fantasy. And then I've also got Jeff Skinner. I think that he is my choice. It's a coin flip between him and Victor Arvidsson, but I think with the contingent upside I think Skinner is going to be the preferred option if someone goes down on the power play with an injury. So that's why I have him over Arvidsson. But you could pick either of those guys. I think are going to be targets for me. Victor Arvidsson right now, his Yahoo ADP is 159.6. Apples and Geno's, he's going at 137.6. Jeff Skinner, his Yahoo ADP, he's going a little bit sooner. It's 138.7, and his apples and Genos is 138.2. So he's actually going slightly later than Arvidsson in apples and Genos best ball leagues. So yeah, I think both of those guys could probably return you value without giving up a ton of draft capital there. The LA Kings, they were pretty solid last year. Surprisingly good. I just they're such a weirdly uninteresting team. Even though they have some interesting guys, but in fantasy, I've noticed that there's not a lot of top end talent on this team in fantasy. You've got Adrian Kempe and Kevin Fiala, I guess, but even Quentin Byfield, like I see him taking a step, and I still don't think that the fantasy relevance is necessarily going to be there. Like you're still going to be picking him probably after pick 100. But last year they were third in the Pacific. They were fourth in Corsi for percentage, fifth in expected goals for percentage, and sixth in scoring chances for percentage. Their 5v5 save percentage was 10th in the league at 910. Cam Talbot had a really good stretch, as did Dave Riddick. It's kind of crazy that their save percentage was that good, but that probably bodes well for their goalies this year, but I will get into that soon. Their shooting percentage was 27th in the league at 8.43%, so they were not converting on this great shot and chance generation that they had. Their power play percentage, they were tied for 11th in the league at 22.6% conversion. So really good underlying stats all across the board outside of the conversion at 5v5. But I think that could probably improve this year. In terms of key departures, Victor Arvidsson out the door, as I just mentioned. He went to Edmonton. Cam Talbot went to Detroit. Matt Roy signed in Washington, and Pierre-Luc Dubois also went to Washington in a trade for Darcy Kemper, who's one of the key additions here. Warren Fogle comes over in free agency. Tanner Jeannot comes over from Tampa, and Joel Edmondson comes over from the Leafs. Darcy Kemper, I think, is an interesting add there. I think he has something left in the tank. I think he had a rough year last year, struggled with injury, but I do think that with the environment in front of him, as we've seen, Dave Riddick and Cam Talbot ended up with the 10th ranked team save percentage at even strength in the league. So I think Darcy Kemper is probably going to be okay here in LA. Yeah, I mean, that brings us right over to the goaltending situation. They've got three guys here. They did bring Phoenix Copley back, which is interesting. He really struggled last year. He had only 8 starts with an 868 even strength save percentage. They had to go to Dave Riddick at a certain point. He had 22 starts with a 927 even strength save percentage. He was exceptional. And then Darcy Kemper had 30 starts in Washington last year with an 897 even strength save percentage. As I mentioned, he really struggled, but I'm excited about Darcy Kemper. I think he's probably going to be a volume starter here. And I think that, like I said, with the defensive environment in front of him, I could see him performing pretty well. And he's going a little bit later in drafts. He's one of the lower volume starters in terms of ADP. So that's a guy that I'm definitely considering taking in the mid to late rounds. In terms of schedule quirks, they have 14 back-to-backs. That's tied for 5th in the league. 31 off nights. That's tied for 11th. Their weeks 22 to 24 playoff schedule. They've got 11 games with 3 off nights, which is pretty solid. Not a ton of off nights, but they have the most amount of games in the league, tied with a few other teams. And then from weeks 23 to 25, they have 12 games with 3 off nights, which is a decent playoff schedule as well. Their power play projection, I've got them rolling out the same power play as they did last year. Obviously, they played pretty well and converted very nicely. I've got Kopitar, Kempe, Kevin Fiala, Quentin Byfield, and Drew Doughty. We've got Brant Clark waiting in the wings. I think that he is going to succeed Doughty at some point, but I don't think it's time yet. So I do think Doughty gets the power play quarterback role at least to start the season next year. In terms of my forward projections, we've got Anze Kopitar for 20 goals, 48 assists, and 68 points. Adrian Kempe, I've got him for 35 goals, 36 assists, 71 points, 263 shots, and 118 hits. Quinton Byfield, I've got him for 23 goals, 40 assists, 63 points. Trevor Moore, 26 goals, 31 assists, and 57 points. Kevin Fiala, I've got him for 29 goals, 49 assists, 78 points. And Philip Deneau, 17 goals, 33 assists, and 50 points. So I'm pretty pretty uninterested in LA Kings outside of maybe Kevin Fiala and Adrian Kempe. Anze Kopitar, I think you're probably going to get him at value. He's getting pushed way down in drafts. In Yahoo drafts, he's actually going at 164. So I'm okay taking Kopitar in that range, but he is definitely seeing some decline in terms of his play driving and his offensive numbers. Quinton Byfield, I think, will take a step this year, but he is playing a new position. He's playing at center. So there could be some growing pains there, but I do still think he's going to get some really nice deployment and may even end up centering the top line with Kempe over Kopitar at some point this year, with Kopitar kind of declining a little bit. So that'll be interesting to watch for sure. But yeah, a lot of a lot of meh on this team in terms of their forward numbers. In terms of my defense projections, I've got Drew Doughty for 9 goals, 42 assists, and 51 points, along with 109 hits and 126 blocks. Brant Clark, I've got him for 14 goals, 23 assists, and 31 points. 37 points. I've been getting screwed on this stupid font. I need to change this font on these slides. I've been sewering Gugsy, and I'm fooling myself here. But yeah, Brant Clark, I do think that this guy is going to play a bigger role this year. With Matt Roy out the door, I think that he's probably going to be a second pair defenseman on this team this year. I think he'll play full time, and I think that he is good enough to generate a decent amount of offense even without power play time. So I think he's their top offensive defenseman of the future. But for now, I think Drew Doughty is going to carry some weight on, at least on the power play. And then my top 3 targets on this team, I've got Kevin Fiala. His ADP right now is on Yahoo. It's 87.1 for a guy that's that I have projected to almost hit 80 points. That's a pretty nice spot for him. In Apples and Geno's leagues, he's at 54.6. So that seems a little bit more correct, I think, for Kevin Fiala. Quinton Byfield, he's another target for me, and it's mostly because he's going at 153.7 in Yahoo leagues, and in Apples and Geno's leagues 179. I'm pretty okay with that. I think there is some upside here further than these 63 points for Quinton Byfield. I think he could take a significant step this year and kind of bring up some of these underlying numbers. So I'm excited to watch him. And then Brant Clark is not being drafted in Yahoo leagues right now. And that's a guy that I think you could put at the bottom end of your roster and be pretty happy with that. And he could potentially break out this year. I have him as a sleeper. So those are my targets for the LA Kings. The San Jose Sharks, they were bad. I don't think it's any secret. They were one of the worst teams ever in NHL history. They were 8th in the Pacific and 32nd in the league, also known as last. In terms of under the hood numbers, their Corsi for percentage, last. Expected goals for percentage, last. Scoring chances for percentage, last. Their 5v5 save percentage was 29th, not last, but not good. It was 892. Their shooting percentage was 32nd, also known as last, with 7.64%. This team just could not put the puck in the net at 5v5 and couldn't generate anything either. It was just absolutely atrocious. Their power play percentage somehow was actually 21st in the league at 20.2%. So they actually converted pretty well on the power play, surprisingly. So I don't know what they were doing there with the way that they played their power play, but they figured something out to kind of squeeze water out of a rock. But all right, let's take a look at the roster because it's changed a lot. Their key departures, we have Mike Hoffman going out the door. Alex Barabanov went back to Russia. Kevin LeBanc is out the door, longtime San Jose Shark. None of them were really significant in terms of fantasy production, but their key additions are huge. Macklin Celebrini obviously was the first overall pick this year, and he is, that is what comes after a season where you get 47 points as a team. You get a guy like Macklin Celebrini, so there's a lot to be excited about him. And then Will Smith, he was their first round pick the year before. He signed and he will be playing this year. Jake Wallman came over from Detroit in an interesting deal. Tyler Toffoli signed in the offseason. That's pretty exciting. I think he really improves the offense on this team. And Yaroslav Askarov came over, and it'll be interesting to see how he's used in net. He's only played one game in the league. That was last year in Nashville. He had a .938 even strength save percentage over that span. They've also got Mackenzie Blackwood. He had 41 starts last year with a .906 even strength save percentage. I mean, not bad considering the environment in front of him. And then Vitek Vanacek, he had 29 starts and had an .897 even strength save percentage. That was in New Jersey. So Vitek Vanacek, I could see Vanacek getting put on waivers when it's all said and done. But we have seen him play okay at times in his career, more so in Washington than in New Jersey. But I could see them running with an Askarov Blackwood tandem here. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I don't know that I'm really in on any of these guys, but they're definitely guys to watch because I think San Jose is going to be improved overall as a team. So it's not necessarily just going to be like a graveyard for goalies as it was last year. Their scheduling quirks, they have 12 back-to-backs, 21 off nights. Those 21 off nights, that's tied for 29th in the league, so not a ton of off nights there. Their weeks 22 to 24 playoff schedule, 8 games with 1 off night. That is the worst over that stretch in the entire league. So that's going to hurt you. In weeks 23 to 25, they actually have 12 games with 6 off nights, which is an exceptional schedule. So if your league goes right to the end, you're a lot happier with Sharks than you would be if things end in week 24 for you in your leagues. Their power play projection, I've got Celebrini, Will Smith, William Eklund, Tyler Toffoli, and Jake Wallman playing the point on the power play. I do think that this could change. I think Michael Granlund is a guy that could play here, maybe over Eklund, but I do think they're going to prioritize I think they're going to play the shit out of Macklin Celebrini. I think he's going to get the Connor Bedard treatment, playing tons of minutes, playing in all situations. And Tyler Toffoli, I think you've got to put him on the top power play, you would think. I think they're going to try and find some chemistry with Will Smith and Celebrini, so it seems natural for them to play together on the power play. So Eklund seems like potentially the odd man out if they decide to go with a guy like Granlund or Zetterlund. Jake Wallman just seems like the guy to quarterback the top power play. I don't know that that's going to be the case, but I mean, who else do you have? Henry Thrun. I mean, he got some run last year, but I just don't see. I don't see it. I've looked at the numbers. I don't see it for Henry Thrun. Maybe he takes a significant step, but Jake Wallman, I think, is a guy that could run a power play at least reasonably well. So that's a guy that I think is going to be a sleeper this year. We'll talk about that a little bit later. My forward projections, I got Michael Granlund for 17 goals, 39 assists, 56 points. William Eklund, 17 goals, 35 assists, 52 points. Fabian Zetterlund, I've got him for 21 goals, 16 assists, 37 points. Macklin Celebrini, 30 goals, 25 assists, 55 points. Tyler Toffoli, I've got him for 33 goals, 23 assists, 55 points, 253 shots. Will Smith, 20 goals, 35 assists, 55 points. And again, as I mentioned earlier when I was talking about Cutter Gauthier, I don't know what I'm doing when I project rookies. I do the best I can, but they're really difficult to project without any kind of NHL data. So, I mean, what are you going to do there? I think I've seen people say Celebrini could be like a 70-point guy. I know Nate and Blake had him closer to 60 points. But I tried to be as conservative as I possibly could with Celebrini and tried to temper my expectations. But that being said, the upside for him is immense. He's supposed to be an exceptional talent and supposed to push for the Calder. So I'm excited to see what happens for Celebrini this year. In terms of defense projections, I've got Mario Ferraro for 4 goals, 16 assists, 20 points, 131 hits, and 192 blocks. He's a guy that is probably just going to be a streamer level guy in a Bangers Cats league. And then Jake Wallman, I've got him for 13 goals, 25 assists, 38 points, 190 shots, and 197 blocks. He's a guy that blocks a ton, doesn't really hit much. And if he gets some run on the power play, I do think he's going to play a lot of minutes this year. But if he gets run on the power play, I do think that this projection is pretty reasonable for him. He's shown that he can produce when he gets that opportunity. So that's a guy that I'm moderately excited for. So my top 3 targets on the San Jose Sharks is Macklin Celebrini, Michael Granlund, Jake Wallman. Celebrini right now is going in Yahoo leagues. He's going at 157. In Apples and Ginos leagues, 190. In that range, I'm very comfortable taking a shot on Celebrini. Obviously, if he doesn't produce the way I want him to, I could just drop him. Not a big deal. Michael Granlund, he showed that he can produce even without anyone around him. So that's a guy. He's going at 176 in Yahoo leagues and 258 in Apples and Ginos best ball leagues. So I mean, obviously, like you might not even need to draft Michael Granlund. You may be able to just pick him up, but that's a guy that I would be watching carefully. Probably will just be a streamer level player, but that's a guy that I'm at least interested in at that range. And then Jake Wallman, I've got him. His Apples and Ginos ADP is 158, and he's not being drafted in Yahoo leagues. So that's a guy that's not on people's radar outside of our Apples and Ginos community and probably a few other fantasy podcasts. I've heard a few talking about Jake Wallman a little bit, but I think that's a guy that you could pick up with the last pick of your draft potentially, and he could produce you really nice value. So that's a guy that I am looking at very, very closely. The Seattle Kraken, they were 6th in the Pacific last year after a really strong year the year before, where they made it to the second round of the playoffs. But yeah, a little bit of regression there. They were 12th in the league in Corsi for percentage, 19th in expected goals for percentage, and 9th in scoring chances for percentage at even strength. So they actually generated pretty well. Their shooting percentage just fell off a cliff. They shot at an insanely high clip the year before, and it went in the complete opposite direction this past year. They were 30th in the league at 7.97%. Their 5v5 save percentage was 7th. With a 912 even strength save percentage as a team, and their power play percentage was 16th at 20.7% conversion. I mean the Kraken did some nice things under the hood, even with their lines being rolled with Dave Haxtell. He's finally out the door. We may be seeing the bigger boys, I don't know if there are big boys on this team, but the bigger boys, the biggish boys, I guess, being leaned on a little bit more, with Dan Bylsma coming to town. We will see. It remains to be seen. It'll be interesting to see how things play out in training camp. But I am excited for the Kraken this year. They're interesting. I think there's going to be some positive regression there at 5v5, and I'm hoping that we're going to see some of these guys produce a little bit better. The key departures, they lost Justin Schultz, Thomas Tatar, and Chris Driedger. None of those guys are really of any consequence. I don't think none of them were really being utilized very significantly. Obviously, Chris Driedger played most of the last 2 years in the minors, so not really a huge loss there. In terms of key additions, Chandler Stevenson and Brandon Montour were the big ones. They were two huge free agent signings. Chandler Stevenson, I've been outspoken saying that is the wildest contract signed this offseason. I don't know what the fuck they're doing with that. I think Shane Wright should be livid about that, especially with the way that he's been treated by this organization and by Dave Haxtell so far in his career. But I'm hoping that he does get an opportunity this year, even with Chandler Stevenson in the fold. And then Brandon Montour, I'm excited for him a little bit, although I do think that there may be a shared power play role, but we'll talk about that in a minute. In terms of goaltenders, Joey Decord had a bit of a breakout season with 46 starts and a .926 even strength save percentage. Philip Grubauer, 34 starts, .906 even strength save percentage. Another year of significant struggles for Grubauer. This is a guy that I wonder if he might be out of the league after his contract's up. It's interesting. I mean, I've been championing him year after year, thinking he's going to bounce back, and he just never does. I think this is probably going to be a 1A, 1B situation with Joey Decord probably starting as the 1A just because of the way that he performed last year. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I think it's probably Decord 1A, Grubauer 1B. In terms of scheduling quirks, they've got 12 back-to-backs, 25 off nights, which is tied for 22nd. Their weeks 22 to 24 playoff schedule, they've got 9 games with 3 off nights. That's not a very good schedule. And from weeks 23 to 25, they've got 11 games with 3 off nights. That's also not amazing over that stretch. So you're probably not super stoked about Seattle Kraken in your playoff weeks, but that may be a later problem. Their power play projection, I've got them going with loading up a power play 1. Hopefully, this is my dream for this team. Obviously, Dan Bylsma has done that in the past, coaching Pittsburgh and Buffalo, but both of those teams had really high-end talent and like just kind of a clear-cut power play 1. But that's not necessarily the way. There's a lot more parity in terms of talent throughout this roster. So it'll be interesting to see how things go. But I have power play 1 set up as Matty Beniers, Jared McCann, Oliver Bjorkstrand, Eli Tolvanen. I'm still not really sure how to say that. And then I've got Brandon Montour and Vince Dunn splitting time. I don't think you bring Brandon Montour in if you're not going to prioritize him on the power play. But that being said, Vince Dunn has been incredibly productive in the last couple of years on the power play as well. So I do think that there may be a share of power play time there. It'll be interesting to see what they do. My forward projections, I've got Matty Beniers for 22 goals, 38 assists, and 60 points. Jared McCann, I've got him for 35 goals, 38 assists, 73 points, 250 shots. Jordan Eberle, 20 goals, 34 assists, 54 points. Chandler Stevenson, 18 goals, 31 assists, 49 points. Eli Tolvanen, 23 goals, 31 assists, 54 points, 175 hits. And Oliver Bjorkstrand, I've got him for 24 goals, 33 assists, 57 points. So I do have Dan Bylsma playing Beniers and Jared McCann a little bit more, just because I think those are your two big boys. I didn't project Shane Wright. I didn't think I had enough data on him, and I don't know where he's going to play in the lineup. It was a little bit confusing to me. I do think he's going to get an opportunity, but I just didn't think I had enough on him to really create a remotely accurate projection. So, but I do think that he's going to factor in there somewhere. I'm obviously most excited about Jared McCann. Like, this guy, I think is probably going to benefit the most from the coaching change. There are a few other guys that I think have been misused. I think Oliver Bjorkstrand is a guy that could potentially bust through 57 points. He played when he was in Columbus. He looked extremely good there, and at times in Seattle he's looked very good as well. But they've kind of used him in a shutdown role, which is strange. So he's kind of taken a hit in terms of his offensive upside, but I think there is still something there with Bjorkstrand too. So a lot of these guys are interesting, but I don't know what their situation's going to be. I don't know who they're going to lean on. So it's hard to kind of project anything, but I do think, like I said, Jared McCann will be the one to most with the coaching change. I've got on defense, Vince Dunn with 10 goals, 39 assists, 49 points. Adam Larson, I've got him for 7 goals, 18 assists, 25 points, 176 hits, 159 blocks. Brandon Montour, I've got him for 14 goals, 36 assists, 50 points. So, I do have Montour and Dunn splitting some power play time. Adam Larson, obviously, he's just a bangers cats guy for the most part. I don't think that the offensive upside is necessarily there. We've seen him obviously score more than 25 points in the past. I don't know that that's necessarily going to be the case consistently. But yeah, Vince Dunn and Brandon Montour, I think they're going to kind of cannibalize each other's points upside just because of the shared power play time. But I do like them both. I would be happy with either of them on my team. My top 3 targets, I've got Jared McCann, Matty Beniers, and Oliver Bjorkstrand. All of these guys are being drafted pretty late. Jared McCann, he's in Yahoo, he's going at 147. In Apples and Genos leagues, he's going at 81. I'm still happy with him at 81. But yeah, I think if I'm getting him past pick 100, I'm pretty happy with that. Matty Beniers, he's not being drafted in Yahoo leagues, and his Apples and Genos ADP is 241. I think he's got some pretty decent points upside and could stand to benefit from an increase in minutes. So I do think that's a guy that I would take a chance on near the end of my draft. And then Oliver Bjorkstrand, his Yahoo ADP is 167.7. And his Apples and Genos ADP is 214.5. And that's a guy that I could see breaking 60 points potentially. Obviously I didn't project him there, but I do think that that's a guy that could potentially get a bit of a bump if he gets increased minutes under Dan Bylsma. The Vancouver Canucks, they were first in the Pacific last year. They were 13th in Corsi for percentage, 7th in expected goals for percentage, and 7th in scoring chances for percentage at even strength. Their 5v5 save percentage was killer, 4th in the league at 916, and their shooting percentage first in the league at 11.49% at even strength. That is an insane even strength save or shooting percentage. That is going to come back down. They had the highest PDO in the league, which is a combined number of when you combine the save percentage and shooting percentage and kind of use that as a luck metric. They had the highest in the league. So that typically means that they're going to come back down to earth a little bit. I factor that into my projections. I was the lowest on Vancouver Canucks out of the 3 of us that did projections at Apples and Genos. But I mean, I'm still relatively high on them. And their power play percentage was 22.6%. That was 11th in the league. They had a really, really solid power play last year, and it could honestly improve this year. Their key departures: Elias Lindholm, Nikita Zadorov, both of their big mid-season trades, mid-season acquisitions last year, that is. And then Casey DeSmith also went out the door. He was their backup last year. with the emergence of Artur Shilovs, I don't think that he was definitely expendable. And then their key additions, they brought in Jake DeBrusk, signed him to a huge contract. Daniel Sprong, they brought him in for really cheap, and Danton Heinen as well. And those are guys that are going to just improve the forward depth on this team. And in goal, we've got Thatcher Demko. He had 51 starts last year with a .924 even strength save percentage, and it's been it's been said that he's hurt and he may not start the season with the team, so that is a little bit concerning. Another player that's hurt in goal for Vancouver is Artur Shilovs. He had 4 starts last year with an .894 even strength save percentage. That was in the regular season. He did excel in the playoffs, and he kind of carried them. Didn't carry them, but he played exceptionally well in the playoffs for them. And they took Edmonton right to the bitter end, and in the second round, like, it could have been them in the conference finals very easily. Yuri Patera is a guy that could get some run here at the start of the year if both of those guys are hurt. He had 5 starts in Vegas last year with a .916 even strength save percentage, so he has played limited time over the last couple of years in the NHL, but he has performed pretty well. And Vancouver is a pretty decent environment in front of them, so I do think that they're probably going to be okay. But I don't know. I do have some concerns about their goaltending situation. You gotta hope that Thatcher Demko comes back sooner rather than later. And obviously, when he does, he'll be the volume starter. But until then, it's really up in the air. So Yuri Patera could be a big 0G guy for the first month of the season if Demko and Shilovs aren't able to go right out of the gate. For schedule quirks, they've got 10 back-to-backs. That's tied for 29th in the league. They have 35 off nights, which is 4th. So tons of off nights for the Canucks. That is going to be extremely useful for you. Their weeks 22 to 24 playoff schedule, they have 10 games with 6 off nights. And then from weeks 23 to 25, 12 games with 8 off nights. That's a lot of off nights. So that's an exceptional. That's one of the best schedules from weeks 23 to 25. From weeks 22 to 24, 10 games and 6 off nights. That's one of the better schedules as well. So your Vancouver Canucks, in terms of the scheduling quirks, it's really interesting. The off nights throughout the season, along with the nice playoff schedules, those are guys that you're going to want to target, I think, and maybe reach a little bit for. And I really mean a little bit. Again, I've said this on a few shows. It's definitely, the scheduling quirks are definitely worth looking at, but don't overthink it. The power play my power play projection for the Canucks, I mean, it's mostly intact from last year. JT Miller, Brock Besser, Elias Pettersson, Quinn Hughes, those are locks. And Jake DeBrusk seems to be the guy that is probably going to slot in as the 4th forward here. I think he's going to have a nice little breakout this year. I'm very excited for Jake DeBrusk on the Canucks. My forward projections, I've got JT Miller for 30 goals, 59 assists, 89 points, 36 power play points, and 200 hits. He is a hit monster. Brock Besser, I've got him for 33 goals, 34 assists, 67 points. Elias Pettersson, 36 goals, 46 assists, 82 points, 104 hits, 74 blocks. An underrated category filler in Elias Pettersson. Jake DeBrusk, I have him for 30 goals, 36 assists, 66 points, and 104 hits. That's a major breakout for Jake DeBrusk. Daniel Sprong, I've got him for 24 goals, 19 assists, 43 points. Dakota Joshua is worth mentioning as well, because I have him for 14 goals, 22 assists, 36 points, but 276 hits, just a little bit less than the Popsicle Martin Pospisil. So that's a guy that you should be taking a hard look at late in your Bangers Cats drafts. Yeah, I mean, JT Miller, a lot of people are gonna think that the points number is a little bit low on him. I do think that he was his some of his percentages and his luck metrics were a little bit high last year, as everyone's were with this team. Brock Besser's the same way. But I do have JT Miller dialed back quite a bit on offense. I was encouraged to hear that Dom Lucian had him at 87 points, and because that's kind of right in the same realm. So I do feel like I got some affirmation there, and I'm not completely off base with that projection. Elias Pettersson, I also have him for a little lower than people probably think. Yeah, I mean, I'm not confident that he's going to play full time with Jake DeBrusk. Like it's very possible that DeBrusk could slot in on the top line with Miller and Besser. I don't think that'll be the case, but there is still some unknowns there with Elias Pettersson. He's had a weird, tumultuous last few seasons. It's been really up and down. So you gotta hope that he smashes through that. And I'm definitely open to him completely destroying that points number. But that's where I have him at here in my projections. Jake DeBrusk, I think he's gonna be prioritized a lot more than he was in Boston. I think he's gonna have a pretty safe power play position, and I'm very excited about DeBrusk this year. On defense, Quinn Hughes, I've got him for 13 goals, 68 assists, 81 points, 35 power play points. Philip Hronik, I've got him for 7 goals, 36 assists, 43 points, and 105 hits. Hronik's a guy that's going to produce very well at 5v5. I'm excited for him as an option near the bottom of your lineup. And then Quinn Hughes, that's a guy that I'm still high on him, obviously, but not as high as most people are. In Yahoo leagues, he's going at 18.5. I just am not comfortable taking Quinn Hughes that early, especially not in a Yahoo draft that's a bangers cats. He's just doesn't bring enough value for me. Like his peripherals are brutal. He just doesn't hit. He doesn't block. So. But yeah, the points upside is immense for Quinn Hughes, absolutely, as we saw this past year. And then the top 3 targets, I've got Jake DeBrusk. I mentioned him before. Let's look at his ADPs. In Yahoo, he's going at 141.9. I'm very comfortable taking him there, and would probably take him quite a bit earlier than that. And his Apples and Cheetos ADP is 116.6. That feels good as well for Jake DeBrusk. I'm pretty excited about this guy. JT Miller, I have him as a target as well. His Apples and Genos ADP is 19.7. And that's right where I would be comfortable taking him. It's hard. A lot of these ADPs, I do think that a lot of these guys are getting overvalued. So in terms of top 3 targets, I picked JT Miller and Elias Pettersson because I'm highest on those 2 guys in general. But I do think their ADPs are reasonable. I actually think in Yahoo, JT Miller's ADP is 12.6. I think that's too high. So I wouldn't be taking him there. Absolutely not. Like I had the turn in Cupful. I think I mentioned this on the last podcast, but my first 2 picks at 14 and 15 were Artemi Panarin and Philip Forsberg, and I would take both of those guys over JT Miller. So I think that 12.6 is a little bit high, but I'm still interested in Miller. I'm still interested. And Elias Pettersson, same thing. I'm interested in him. But Jake DeBrusk, this really should be a top 1 target. Let's be honest. Jake DeBrusk, I am all in on this guy. Absolutely. The Vegas Golden Knights, they were 4th in the Pacific last year after just a cataclysmic fall from grace in the second half of the season. They were 22nd in Corsi for percentage, 15th in expected goals for percentage, and 18th in scoring chances for percentage at even strength. So really, really meh numbers at even strength. Their 5v5 save percentage was 11th in the league at 908, so pretty decent goaltending. And their shooting percentage was 12th in the league at 9.68% at even strength. Their power play percentage was tied for 20th at 20.2%. So, I mean, none of these numbers are really incredible for the Golden Knights. They just somehow figure out a way to claw things out. And I don't know, man. It's going to be interesting to see what they look like this year, because when we look at the key departures and key additions, I do feel like they had more going out the door than they have coming in. Jonathan Marchessault obviously left after being lowballed, left for Nashville. Logan Thompson got traded to the Capitals. Chandler Stevenson signed in Seattle, as previously mentioned, and then Anthony Mantha left for the Calgary Flames. And then in terms of key additions, Ilya Samsonov comes in to replace Logan Thompson. Alexander Holtz comes over from New Jersey in a trade where Paul Cotter got sent the other way. Akira Schmid also came over in that deal, so he'll be the third goaltending option, I would assume. And then Victor Olofsson was an offseason signing as well, so it'll be interesting to see where he slots in. He kind of played all over the place in Buffalo, but there's really not a ton of offensive depth on this team, so he could play a bigger role than maybe some people think. In terms of goaltending, Adin Hill had 35 starts last year, had a bit of injury troubles, but still played well when he was there. He had a .912 even strength save percentage. Ilya Samsonov in Toronto had 40 starts with a .901 even strength save percentage. Really struggled last year at times. He's been pretty up and down in his career, but that's a guy that when he's hot, he looks really good. So that's a guy that I'm keeping a close eye on here, because if he could potentially steal the 1A position in Vegas. I do think that it'll probably be a tandem situation where Adin Hill is the 1A and Samsonov is the 1B, but it could potentially flip at some point. And Adin Hill, like I mentioned, he's had injury troubles in the past, so it's possible that Samsonov gets a nice little run here. In terms of scheduling quirks, they have 13 back-to-backs. That's tied for 11th in the league. 32 off nights. That is tied for 7th. And from weeks 22 to 24, their playoff schedule, they have 10 games with 3 off nights. And then from weeks 23 to 25, they have 12 games with 3 off nights. Both of those are decent playoff schedules. Not a ton of off nights, but a decent amount of games. In terms of their power play projection, I've got Jack Eichel, Ivan Barbashev, Mark Stone, Thomas Hertl, and Shea Theodore. There has been some discussion about, is it Theodore or Hanifin that are going to play on the power play? I do think Shea Theodore probably gets a run out of the gate. I do think he has way more offensive upside than Noah Hanifin. But yeah, I do see Eichel, Stone, and Hertl kind of being locks here as long as Stone is healthy. Barbashev, I'm not really sure about. There are a few other guys that are relatively interesting. Victor Olofsson, as we mentioned before, is there. Pavel Dorofeyev is a young guy that's kind of coming up the ranks. He had performed well in limited time last year and will probably have a full-time spot with the team this year. And then Alexander Holtz that came over. He was a highly touted prospect that just hasn't really gotten a good opportunity in New Jersey. So, I mean, there's a huge opportunity here in Vegas with a severe lack of offensive depth. So they are looking quite a bit thinner up front, and any of those guys I think could slot in at the fourth forward position, but I do have Barbashev penciled in there to start at the very least. In terms of my projections for the forwards, I've got Jack Eichel for 39 goals, 47 assists, 86 points, 337 shots. I also have him for a ton of blocks as well. So Jack Eichel, I'm very excited about. Ivan Barbashev, got him for 19 goals, 33 assists, 52 points, and 165 hits. Mark Stone, 26 goals, 46 assists, 72 points if he plays 82 games. Thomas Hertl, I've got him for 25 goals, 43 assists, 68 points. Pavel Dorofeyev, I've got him for 24 goals, 16 assists, 39 points. Alexander Holtz, 22 goals, 22 assists, 44 points. And William Karlsson, I've got him for 21 goals, 32 assists, 53 points. Now, Holtz is another guy that's hard to project just because he's really played sheltered minutes in New Jersey, and again has not gotten a very good opportunity, was healthy scratched a ton, kind of had a hard time getting into a rhythm. But I have him projected to play on the second line and get a few more minutes. So I gave him a minutes bump. That's why I've got him at 22 goals. I do think that he has the ability to score like that. And I'm hoping he does get that opportunity here. Dorofeyev, I think, will play in the top 6 as well. And he can definitely get there. He's shown already in the past year or two in small samples that he can score. I'm pretty excited about Eichel and Hurdle down the middle on this team. I think that both of them are going to produce very nicely, and I'm comfortable taking them. I think they're being undervalued in drafts as well, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's look at the defense first. I've got Noah Hanifin with 9 goals, 39 assists, 48 points, and 118 blocks. I've got Alex Pietrangelo with 11 goals, 31 assists, 42 points, and 191 blocks. And then Shea Theodore with 13 goals, 51 assists, 64 points, and 125 blocks. So I do have Theodore projected to play on the top power play for most of the year. And then I have Hanifin and Pietrangelo getting in on a little bit of power play time here and there as well. So Pietrangelo obviously has the upside. He blocks. He gets so many shot blocks, and that definitely helps his value. But his offensive ceiling has definitely decreased. I think 42 points is probably the ceiling for Pietrangelo, unless somehow he gets some power play time. But I just don't see that being the case anymore. Noah Hanifin, I think if he does end up getting on the top power play, could smash through 48 points. So that's a guy that I'm really interested in. He's a guy that I think is probably at the top end of guys that aren't necessarily going to be sure things to get power play time that will produce pretty well at 5v5 anyways. So I'm definitely interested in him, and he's one of my top 3 targets. So as we jump into the top 3 targets, I've got Jack Eichel, Shea Theodore, and Noah Hanifin. Jack Eichel, I looked at his ADP on Yahoo. It's 40.1. That's crazy. Jack Eichel going in the mid 4th round is ludicrous. In Apples and Geno's leagues, he's going at 26, which seems much more reasonable. Jack Eichel, I think early 3rd round is very, very nice, and I think he could definitely live up to that draft capital. But yeah, if he falls any further than that, I'm absolutely grabbing Jack Eichel for sure. Shea Theodore, his Yahoo ADP is 111. If he gets top power play and is able to get up to 60 something points like I have him projected for, that's pretty nice at 111. I think that's pretty nice value. And then Noah Hanifin is also going at 111 on Yahoo, so right around the same time. So people are I think that people are wondering who is it going to be, and in Apples and Geno's leagues, people are thinking it's Shea Theodore because he's going at 83. Noah Hanifin's going at 113 in Apples and Geno's leagues. So I think that is the way it's going to go, but Hanifin I think is a safe gamble at that range as well. So that's a guy that I'm definitely targeting too. That is all I've got. That's all I've got for today. Thank you for bearing with me and just listening to my monotone. Well, I try not to be monotone, but I mean, it's tough. It's tough getting through this beefy material. Obviously this wasn't as much of a beefer as it has been with a co-host. But I do miss having Gugsy on the mic with me here, so I'm looking forward to getting him back on next week. please leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you to those who already have. It's helped us a lot with our audience growth, and thank you to the people that include me in your podcast reviews. I really appreciate it. I know Nate and Blake are kind of the faces of Apples and Ginos, but it does warm my heart and put a smile on my face when I get a name drop in an Apple Podcast review or a Spotify review. So I appreciate the people that have done that. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're spitting out a ton of content on there, and it helps us a ton. And like as many videos as you can as well, because that also helps us a lot and helps us reach more people. Also, if you like our content, check out the Apples and Ginos Patreon to support us on a monthly basis and get some extra perks. We have brand new Patreon tiers this year, so you're going to want to check that out. We also have an Apples and Ginos fantasy hockey guide that is out. It's 141 pages of great content to help you prep for your fantasy hockey drafts, and I highly recommend checking that out. That's also on the Apples and Ginos Patreon for just a measly $7.99. So not a whole lot out of your pocket for some good light reading to prep you for your fantasy hockey drafts. Hop into the Apples and Ginos Discord server as well. We've got lots of discussions about fantasy hockey in there. We've got over 1,300 rabid fantasy hockey managers just looking to help each other out and discuss this crazy obsession that we all have. Shout outs to the band They're There for providing our music. Their Spotify link is in the episode description. Follow us on X. Nate is at Apples Ginos. Blake is at Blake Creamer AG. I'm at Just Josh and 41. Please practice safe stats and happy drafting. Have a good one, folks.
Excellent. Soon the championship will be ours. All ours.